Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Manufacturing Management live panel event. My name is Chris Beck, Editor of Manufacturing Management. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dick Elsy, who's the Chief Executive of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult and the brains behind the Ventilator Challenge UK, a group of leading manufacturers that was mobilised all the way back in March to help the NHS and the healthcare industry cope with the peak of the COVID-19 crisis and what threatened to be a critical shortage of medical equipment, such as ventilators. Now, in a previous panel, we spoke to a number of these leading firms, but today, Dick, we've got the head honcho. I'm delighted to have you with us today. Can we start off just by talking about the background to the consortium and kind of how it came about, really?
Yeah, sure. Well, and sort of early to mid-March, there was growing, and it became quite well known that there was likely to be a shortage of clinical ventilators. I think by mid-March there was something like 5,000 or 6,000 clinical ventilators, and the forecast, with the sombrero, was going to hit something like the requirement for 25,000. So the government started to pull together what was called a rapidly manufactured ventilator system specification, with the view that it could invite non-clinical device manufacturers to kind of bid in and seek to repurpose their manufacturing facilities to make these sort of quick to market ventilator systems. And a number of us had sight of this emerging in early March and started to have some conversations about how industry might respond. And it all came together in a sort of formal event with the Cabinet Office led by Michael Gove, the Cabinet Office Secretary, had, best part of 100 industrial firms on the phone with them presenting the rapidly manufactured ventilator spec, saying, right, over to you, business. And it was all, at the end of the call, any comments from industry? And there was like complete silence because I think everybody was like assimilating how on earth do we respond to this formal request. Multiple industries, auto, aero.
Yeah.
So in that vacuum of silence, my catapult instincts kicked in, and I said, I'll pull some people together and see what's possible. So I kind of made this offer right at the end of the call in this vacuum of silence. So I then started to make some calls around those who'd expressed an interest in getting involved, and we started to build a consortium out of that. It was principally people who were prepared to take a personal and corporate risk to do something that their business wouldn't normally do.
Well, yes, and as you say, it was companies that have had no real experience of making ventilators or parts of ventilators. As you say, It was automotive, aerospace, and like I said at the beginning, we spoke to a few of them a few weeks ago about their experiences of it. So how you said that it was basically a kind of volunteer system where people would put their hands up and say they'd like to help out, but what kind of criteria did you have for deciding who did what?
Criteria first and foremost, I mean, pretty basic is if you're going to be in, are you actually in and prepared to commit resources, time, effort? And at that time, we didn't know how we were going to get remunerated and where we're going to get the money from. So it really was quite a big gamble. So those that were involved really had to pass that critical initial criteria. So that's why knowing people who would respond to that is the basis of the phone calls. But once we got a small group established, we then started to look at the challenge. And I know a number of businesses formed partnerships or went off on their own to take a look at an all-new system to respond to this RMVS spec, as it was called. Our consortium, though, got together and said, look, what's the quickest way to market for GITS? If the challenge is to produce a lot of stuff safely and quickly that's going to be effective, how best to do that? And we very quickly alighted on the concept of getting behind an existing manufacturer. So, who makes ventilators in the UK and how do we get behind them? And that led us to being linked into Smiths Industries, who make a paramedic device out of Luton. and we rapidly got together with them to understand the make of the device and how we might help scale it up, because they're producing a few tens a week. How would we go about doing it? So we started a conversation with Smiths, and we started to assemble more capability within the consortium. So we had Formula One guys through McLaren with all the standards of medical device manufacture and the standards, the ISO standards that in Siemens Healthineers, to go alongside the ventilator manufacturers and help us with the quality standards and approach. And having built credibility as an operational consortium supporting the Smiths device, we were asked by Cabinet Office to take a look at another ventilator which had surfaced as a front runner in the RMBS process, and basically a small Abingdon-based manufacturer of anesthesia equipment called Penlon had configured some of its existing equipment in a device to answer the RMBS specification in full. So this basically was the clinician's choice against the RMBS. If you could produce those, they'd be fantastic. They would absolutely meet the requirements of the RMBS spec. So we were asked by Cabinet Office, because we were a credible industrial group, to have a look at that device. And we sent a SWAT team into Penlon and made a very rapid decision that, yes, it is something that we could industrialize. And then we kicked the whole thing off from there with Penlon. And just to give an example, I mean, so they make just about 4 or 5 devices a week. And I'll just tell you now, we're making 300 a day.
300 a day, wow.
Of that device. It's just unbelievable.
So
industrialization from, yeah.
Yeah, like you say, the industrialization, the scaling up of it. And I assume or the vast majority of the consortium members are playing their part in that, and each making their own.
Oh yes, I mean across everything, we've got about 5,000 people all up being involved in this enterprise. Wow. It's been quite extraordinary. And you know, with that device, just let's focus on that as the big piece of industrialization. I mean, there are 3 parallel factories. One in Broughton with Airbus making the absorber and flow meter assembly. And there's 8 lines, 550 people on 5 shifts. We've got the Ford Motor Company making the ventilator assembly itself out of Dagenham. It's multi-shifting, 24 hours a day. And McLaren have been making the trolley assembly, as McLaren would. It's got 4 wheels and beautifully presented trolley. So anything with wheels. So they're producing the trolley assemblies, and it all comes together at STI in Hook and then goes on to final tests. It's a serious piece of industrialization, and all of that was mobilized in a matter of a very few weeks. So the Airbus Broughton facility was designed through a digital twin. So we did all of the factory planning and modeling through a digital twin, proved it all out, and had the factory built in less than 30 days. It was operational.
That's actually a very, like you say, extraordinary, and also very interesting. The digital twin, the kind of use of technology. We've again done a number of these panel discussions looking at whether this could be a watershed moment for the big buzzword Industry 4, and whether now companies are really starting to see the benefits that things like digital twins can have. Actually, Brian Holliday from Siemens on our previous ventilator panel talked a lot about the work they've done with digital twins and that kind of technology. Do you think it's now made, certainly at least the kind of consortium members sit up and realise what an impact it can have?
So I mean, it's one of those things forged out of a crisis. We were forced into using the tools because we didn't have time for the facility not to be right first time. So we just basically deployed the tools that we've within the Catapult. We've been working a lot of these things. We've been working closely with Siemens on stuff like that. So basically gathering together stuff that we've had on the technological stocks, if you like, just getting on and using them because we had to. And having used them in full flight in anger, we've realized really how powerful they are. And I think that's made us think, we no longer need a crisis to justify using them. These are really, really powerful tools. So they should form the basis of everything we do from here. I mean, even the other thing we used from a technological sort of industry 4.0 point of view was remote training. So we had several thousand people to train on how to put ventilator assemblies and ventilators together. And the normal process, of course, would be to get them in a classroom, talk through the process sheets, get them line side to see how it's done and learn from the existing operations. Of course, we had the big overlay of a COVID risk, so you couldn't co-locate people. So that was one of our biggest challenges at the outset. Like, my God, how do we do this? And of course, we've been developing a lot of this workplace virtual reality and augmented reality within the high value manufacturing Catapult. So we've got a couple of years experience of doing that. So we literally commandeered a load of devices, HoloLens, Microsoft HoloLens devices from within my own team, and started to deploy them to see how, can we make this stuff work? And we had great support from Microsoft, who kind of immediately jumped at the chance of using their resources. So suddenly, what was a commandeered few HoloLens 2s from my team suddenly became several dozens of devices and a whole load of support from Microsoft. So we were able, through that relationship, to put big training packages together and start to train people remotely, and it worked really well. I mean, it wouldn't have happened without that, actually.
No, of course not. No, and you've mentioned one of the big hiccups and one of the big challenges for you, I suppose, was the social distancing. Especially in mid-March, there was no chance of anyone being able to go and show anyone at Ford or Airbus how to make a ventilator.
That's right, yeah.
And yet, in a few weeks, you've managed to set up basically an entire, like you say, industrial production of ventilators, basically an entire supply chain with companies that have never done it before, which of course something you can look back on now and be very proud of, and quite rightly. But when we're on that call with Michael Gove, and you said at the end, let me see what I can do. I mean, first of all, that's very brave, very admirable. But what was the first thing that made you, the first challenge that you faced, the kind of big thing that made you think, oh, maybe I've potentially bitten off more than I can chew here?
Well, I mean, ultimately, somebody had to step up. It's a national crisis. So, and the companies that we'd got involved, some serious players with a lot of capability. And I just, we all knew intuitively that we had the capability to do it. And we knew also we had access to a lot of really good quality engineering resource. I mean, we've got some, not only within the bigger companies, but the Formula One teams, of course, were basically had stood down from racing. So, we had an awful lot of sharp engineering expertise at our fingertips, and we just all knew intuitively that whatever challenge was thrown at us, we would be able to find an engineering solution. So there was a very, very high degree of engineering confidence that we could do it. We faced some pretty big challenges, for example, in setting up these parallel supply chains, because these ventilators were being made in very small volumes. There was an opportunity to crank up the volumes within existing supply chains, but you can imagine at those almost cottage industry levels, that was soon very stressed. So we had to put completely parallel supply chains in place, and we had some real big challenges. I mean, one notable one was that the Penlon device does contain a microprocessor in its circuit board, and started, right, where can we get this microprocessor from? Well, it's no longer manufactured, and all existing global stocks are zero. So how do you go about doing that? So that felt like could take months. We didn't have months, but the McLaren team, with all of their support from Arrow Electronics and their network, just literally rose to the challenge and said, right, we'll get the data. We found the data of the chip, and we managed to procure some fabrication space. So basically, this is a chip that's been recreated from scratch, identical to the 12-year-old device. Incredible. And that was pulled off in a matter of, well, the deal was done in a matter of 2 or 3 days, and the fabrication was done in a very, very few weeks, and never actually ended up on the critical path in the program. So, an extraordinary thing to do. I mean, it might not sound it to the general public, but to recreate a legacy chipset from nothing is an incredible undertaking. And yet, so it's a sort of image or picture of the scale of the sorts of challenges we faced, and just used engineering force, if you like, to break through it. And so, there were, in terms of proud moments, I mean, there were moments like that. And it was a bit of a roller coaster ride, because when we found we couldn't get the chip, I mean, it was felt disabling at the time. Yeah. But then we picked ourselves up, found an engineering solution, got the fabrication booked. And even, I have to say, fantastic support from the Cabinet Office, because we needed a liquidity, we needed a chunk of money to put down to get that fabrication space booked. And they came up with that money within 24 hours. So wow. A great piece of teamwork, actually.
Well, that's exactly, that's the kind of overriding sense of not just, the work that you guys have done in the ventilator challenge, but all across industry, with companies kind of stepping up and playing their part, however large or small it is. There seems to be this sense of collaboration, of teamwork, of almost camaraderie across the industry and across other sectors as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's something that manufacturing in particular and engineering can learn from, and will hopefully kind of become a bit more collaborative going forward once things return to some sense of normality, and the need for ventilators isn't quite so great?
Yeah, sure. I think, well, certainly the companies that have been involved in it have seen this fantastic collaborative spirit. We've also seen things that we've had to empower people to make decisions. We've had to allow teams to self-organize, because we haven't had, there's been no command and control structure here. This is a group of companies coming together on a common mission. So we've learned an awful lot about empowerment, allowing people to do the right thing, giving them decision-making autonomy, not second-guessing them, not putting lots of bureaucratic processes in the way of getting on with progress. And that in itself has been an incredibly energizing environment to work in. So there's quite a few lessons there about maintaining that spirit when we go back into the day job. But the all-pervading team spirit, rallying around a common challenge, has been terrific. So there's always been support for each other. We're talking really senior people here. I mean, these are captains of industry who are in the center of this with their sleeves rolled up, getting on with the engineering. Been terrific support for each other, which has been very motivational. It's enabled us to get things done very quickly. And certainly those companies involved will take that spirit away with them. Key question then is, can we infect others with that? Well, two things. First of all, we're all facing some really serious challenges, even the whole concept of getting back to operational work in manufacturing. So that I see no reason why that spirit, because it's forged in another different form of crisis, is getting back to work, is why we can't see greater collaboration and support in that. So there's no reason for that at all. And we saw actually within the ventilator challenge that spirit of collaboration, without having to force it or instruct it, found its way to every nook and cranny of the organization. So we didn't set out with some grand vision of collaboration and these are our values, these are our rule sets, the corporate values of the ventilator challenge. We just didn't have the time to do that. We just got on with the job. and in a spirit of collaboration, and that was infectious. So people seeing a group of companies get together to do that went to every corner. So talking to an aircraft technician and fitter in Broughton, who'd normally be assembling wings, snagging some problems on a absorber assembly of the ventilator, exactly the same spirit of collaboration across different companies with them. And it was fantastic to see that. So it kind of spread quite naturally. So again, are there reasons why that can't happen with other industries? In the sort of, once we've put ventilators to bed and moved on, I don't see any reason why it can't.
No. Interesting how you were saying, that there was no kind of central command and everyone was within reason, autonomous to do their own, to play their own part and do their own thing, and there was no kind of, like you say, kind of company values.
There was no hierarchy, and
no.
That rule one of the consortium, and I remember it well, was no egos.
Sure, yeah. Oh, that's a great kind of great mantra to abide by. How did you have regular meetings, like Zoom meetings or Teams meetings?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I mean, all of this was done. A lot of us have been confined to barracks. Waiting from our laptops, and it's quite interesting. We formed a relationship principally on platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Teams, I have to say, was very useful because it not only enabled us to communicate, it also enabled us to have a platform for all of our shared information to be on there, bills of material, data, drawing specs, meeting notes, and all that sort of thing. And we did meet regularly. We were on Zoom and Teams a lot of the time. As far as formal meetings are concerned, we had really crisp stuff. So, a lot of the meetings were like 15 or 20 minutes, but always backed up with really good quality data. So you're making decisions, quick decision making in those meetings, but it was always supported by really good quality data presented in a really easy to read or see format. So we had very much a culture of having dashboard stuff that you look at, in terms of the flow of parts in, what the key challenges were, red, amber, green status, focusing on the reds, kind of all stuff that engineering and manufacturing companies do, but done in a really slick way. So we used some pretty good tools and had some really good people helping us with that transaction from a lot of data of disparate platforms brought together in a very focused fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think the success of the work that you've done with the ventilator challenge, do you think that could be applied to other kind of very large challenges that are facing the industry and the kind of wider world, like climate change, global warming, that sort of thing? Could expertise be brought together?
It's been a very intense experience, as you might expect. And it's quite interesting. In the first 3 or 4 weeks, the core team, core exec team, we were working sort of 18 to 20 hours a day. So we'd be having phone calls at something looking like midnight and exchanging emails at something starting with a 4 in the morning. But we were making such incredible progress. So we were overfueled on adrenaline for sure. But the sense of achievement was really profound and quite interesting because we had stripped all the noise out. We had empowered people and described this very energizing environment. Mark Matheson, who's the lead at McLaren on this, said to me late one night, he said, "Hey Dick, we could work like this all the time, couldn't we?" So aside from the 18, I said, "Look, we can't do the 18-hour days, Mark, but you've got a real point. Why can't we apply this to the next big challenges that are facing us?" And it's a slower burn problem, but it's equally as important. The whole issue of decarbonising the economy. Because I know we've been hit by a short-term crisis of an unexpected pandemic, but we've got major problems to fix that are damaging the planet, and we need to get to grips with that. And there are engineering solutions available. We need to get on with them. So there's no reason why we can't apply that same sense of mission and collaboration to stuff like that. And I've already started to actually have some conversations with the business minister, Nadine Zahawi, about how we can use the learning experience to rise to the challenge of these next big things. Because I mean, what could be more motivational than getting industry back on its feet, but rising, perhaps with support from government, rising to the next big set of challenges and using all that engineering expertise that was able to magic some ventilators out of nowhere into sustainable manufacturing, zero carbon. Let's put some effort into that, because it'll be motivational, rewarding. It'll keep the torch lit for innovation and keep some of our best engineers on their toes.
Absolutely, yeah. And you said there, the conversations that you've had with government, all this was sparked by a conversation with Michael Gove. You've had support from government financially throughout, and the results that you've proved in the last couple of months have been nothing short of miraculous in many respects. Do you think that initiatives like this will get the general public, and I suppose government in general, but the public more, who have this problem, I suppose, with manufacturing and this kind of identity crisis with the sector? Do you think this is a good, if nothing else, a good bit of PR for manufacturing and engineering in the UK, and people are going to be sitting up and taking a bit more notice of the amazing work that the sector can do?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I think it's how you keep the story fresh, and it's very helpful. Publications like yours taking a keen interest. We've pushed hard on the story to make sure that we maximise exposure for engineering and manufacturing in the UK, because it is a good story. But we're really keen to keep going with it, and we're in some conversations with partners about putting together a sort of interactive storyboard so people can actually see, the scale of the challenge, what was in it, what we did. So we're looking to try and continue to build the story out and communicate it. But we're relying on our network of publication friends to keep pushing it. And I think it is a great story. It's a great celebration of engineering and manufacturing, and we hope actually it's going to inspire engineers current who might be feeling a bit, having a tough time at the moment, but also to bring in some new blood, because I mean, who wouldn't want to be involved in something like that as a sort of engineering finest hour?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's been, I think it's one positive to have come out of the terrible circumstances of the last few months has been the way that not just engineering, manufacturing, but loads of sectors, like we've spoken about earlier, have all just stepped up and kind of really come together, and there's this sense of unity now, and everyone working towards the common goal. And we can only hope that continues, going forward, like we've discussed.
Yes, I think, well, if people have been involved in these things, whether it's Ventilator Challenge or producing PPE, all of those things, it's a difficult experience to forget. So, as I said, I think if you asked my colleagues in the centre of Ventilator Challenge, I think we'd all have described the experience as life-changing. So it's had quite a profound effect on our thinking, and it's almost hard to imagine that can't be carried through into the things. It might make us actually more difficult people to work with. It might be slightly less tolerant of bureaucracy, I think, but that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely not. No, I think engineering, manufacturing, it sometimes needs that freedom to be able to do its own thing.
That's it. That's one of the interesting things is having given people freedom to operate in order to get the job done. You might think that would engender a high degree of risk in the program, because you're allowing people to self-organize, get on and do the job. And it's quite interesting to reflect, with companies, big companies, there are governance structures, authority levels. All of these things are put in place to ensure tight control and the right degree of discipline in the business. And yet many of those things actually get in the way of people doing the right thing and kind of slow the process up. And really at no point in empowering people did we actually get caught out by, well, when things went wrong, because there was such a high degree of ownership with people that people naturally self-corrected, sorted the problem out themselves. And when they had a problem, which could cause a broader issue for the challenge, they just said, look, I've got a problem, I need help. And we just pounced on it. Yep, okay, your problem is our problem, get it sorted. So opening this whole thing up to enable it to function, ultimately didn't create any risk, any extra risk by doing it. So there's a really interesting lesson there is, within big businesses, there's all of these, constraints and controls and everything, all put in for good reason. I think we're all going to go back to our workplace and just challenge some of that. Is it there for the right reasons? Actually, is it actually getting in the way of our people doing the right thing?
Yeah, definitely. And we've got 5 minutes or so left before we get booted off the call. So we'll begin wrapping up. Dick, you announced at the beginning of the year that you were planning on retiring. This probably isn't the kind of the last few months of your career that you were expecting. But I mean, what a way, if this is the end, as it were, what a way to bow out. What a legacy that you personally have been able to leave on the sector and the kind of wider nation.
Okay, well, I hope it's not a kind of swan song, because there's still life in the old dog yet. But I was planning to step back in August, and it just seemed like completely. Well, first of all hands to the pump with ventilators, and then industry's got challenges to get back on its feet, and the HVM Catapult's got a role to play in helping with that. So very distracting for me to be leaving at that sort of time. So I'm going to continue on for a few months at least, just to make sure that we help our friends in industry that we've been big supporters of us, is do whatever we can to help them get back on their feet, get operational again. And very importantly, actually, I said the words before, is keep the torch lit for innovation, because it's one of the easy things to drop when faced with the challenges that we've all had. It's going to be a big challenge just to operate in a COVID-friendly environment for manufacturing. And there's a danger that the innovation programs and innovation thinking gets parked. I see us trying to hold the torch for that. Keep focused. Try to find ways with our colleagues in government of making it attractive to support programs, collaborative R&D programs. Can we get more favourable terms? So I'm doing a lot of work in the background to try and do that, to make sure that we don't drop the bat, because it would be really bad for us if we lost our innovation mojo in this space, because it's tough enough losing business. But the one thing that is great about the UK is we do have a fantastic innovation capability. We're a pretty smart nation, and it's one of our competitive advantages. We haven't got cheap energy, we haven't got cheap labour, but we have got great technical know-how, and it's really important that we keep that alive and kicking.
Absolutely. I think it would be a real crying shame to take a step back from where we are now. Dick, this has been a fascinating and inspirational, dare I say, conversation. It's great to see. We bang the drum about the kind of brilliance of the people in UK manufacturing, and it's over the last few months they've really stepped up and played their part, no matter how big or how small, whether you're making ventilators or whether you're making hand sanitizer or whatever. Everybody has played their part, and it's something that, like you, we're keen to see continue this kind of spirit of
great. Well, you keep telling the story, whether it's ventilators or hand sanitizer or PPE, what's happening out there is a fantastic thing. And of course a celebration.
Absolutely, and long may it continue. I thank you very much for your time, and hopefully everybody who's watched this has found it as inspirational as I have, and it kind of encourages them to continue with this spirit of openness and collaboration, and, like you say, innovation, for for the foreseeable. So thank you very much, Dick, and thank you everybody for watching.